But they're when it really bothers them. What bothers me is that I want to see a player play at his level. At my age, people still misunderstand what toughness really means in hockey. They think it's about pain. They think it's about physical pressure. That's the surface. The toughest opponents I ever faced were the ones who took control away from me without touching me. I played hockey at my best when I dictated the pace, when I decided where the puck went, when the rush started, when the play opened. That was my edge. But there were players who knew how to erase that advantage. They didn't chase me. They didn't panic. They waited. They closed space early and quietly until the ice stopped feeling like mine.
Those players forced decisions before I was ready to make them. They turned instinct into calculation. When a defenseman starts thinking instead of flowing, the game shifts. You're no longer shaping the play.
You're responding to it. And in hockey, response is weakness. This isn't a list about hate. It isn't about grudges. These were the opponents who interfered with my rhythm, who disrupted my timing, who made every shift feel uncertain. I didn't fear them, but I had to respect the problem they created. Those were the toughest rivals I ever faced. Number 5, Bobby Clarke. Bobby Clarke was never the fastest player I faced, and he wasn't the biggest either. What made him a problem was something far more difficult to deal with. Clarke understood disruption better than anyone. He didn't try to win the game outright against me. He tried to make my game uncomfortable, possession by possession, shift by shift. When I had the puck, Clarke was already in my lane. Not close enough to commit a penalty, not far enough to give me space. He positioned himself where my options disappeared quietly. Passing lanes closed early. Angles tightened. I was forced to move the puck sooner than I wanted. That's how he worked. He didn't react to what I did. He anticipated it and took the choice away before it existed. The toughest part about playing against Clarke was that you couldn't rush your way through him. Speed usually gave me separation. Against him, it didn't. He read timing better than most defensemen. He knew when to pressure and when to back off, just enough to bait a mistake. That constant uncertainty is exhausting. You don't lose one big battle. You lose a series of small ones that add up over a game. Clarke also understood that hockey isn't only played on the puck. He leaned into positioning, stick placement, and awareness. He forced me to work for clean exits. He forced me to take hits. I normally avoided, not because he crushed me physically, but because he guided me into traffic. That's a different kind of toughness. It doesn't show up in highlights, but it changes how you approach the ice. Against Clarke, I couldn't rely purely on instinct. I had to calculate. I had to double check lanes, rethink timing, and adjust routes. That's when you know an opponent has entered your head. When you're a defenseman who plays on rhythm, hesitation is the real enemy. Clarke created hesitation without ever needing to overpower me. What made him especially difficult was his consistency. He didn't have to win every shift, he just had to be there every time. The pressure never lifted. Over the course of a game that wears on you, over a series it forces changes, you start simplifying, you start choosing safer options. And that's exactly what he wanted. Bobby Clarke didn't beat me by stopping me once. He beat me by interfering with my rhythm all night long. He turned control into caution. And in a game built on flow, that kind of interference makes an opponent tougher than most people ever realize. Number 4, Denis Potvin. Denis Potvin was a problem because he understood something very few players did at the time. He didn't try to outskate me. He didn't try to outmuscle me. He tried to neutralize the very idea that a defenseman could control the game through movement. That made him dangerous in a way that wasn't obvious at first glance. When I faced Potvin, the ice felt different. Not tighter, not slower, just less predictable. He read the flow of the game the same way I did, but from the opposite side. He knew where the play wanted to go before it got there. That meant my usual advantage anticipation wasn't exclusive anymore. Every time I stepped up to join the rush, he was already positioned to counter it. What made Potvin tough wasn't pressure. It was denial. He denied momentum. He denied rhythm. When I tried to accelerate the game, he slowed it down. When I tried to stretch the ice, he compressed it. That constant push and pull forced me to question decisions I normally made without thinking. And in hockey, once you start questioning, you've already lost part of your edge. Potvin also knew how to manage risk. He didn't chase highlight moments. He stayed disciplined, kept his angles clean, and waited for mistakes instead of forcing them. That patience was frustrating. Against most opponents, if you pushed hard enough, something would break. Against Potvin, nothing did. The structure held. Every shift felt like skating into a system that refused to bend. The hardest part was that Potvin didn't need to engage me directly to have an impact. Even when he wasn't matched against me, his presence dictated how his team played. Zone entries were tighter. Transitions were cleaner. The pace never spiraled out of control. That meant fewer opportunities for me to impose myself naturally on the game. Against him, I had to simplify. I had to pick my spots carefully. That's not where I was most dangerous. My game was built on flow and instinct, not restraint. Potvin forced restraint. He forced discipline on a player who thrived on freedom. That tension defined every matchup. Denis Potvin didn't stop me with strength or speed. He stopped me by understanding the same language of hockey I spoke and using it against me. He turned the game into a chess match when I wanted it to be movement and instinct. And when a defenseman makes you play his structure instead of your rhythm, that's toughness. You don't forget. Number 3, Guy Lafleur. Guy Lafleur was tough because he broke one of the few assumptions I could usually rely on. Against most elite forwards, if I closed space early enough, I could dictate the outcome. With Lafleur, space wasn't something you could simply take away. He recreated it over and over again. What made Lafleur different was how quickly he turned motion into threat. He didn't need prolonged possession. He didn't need time to set up. One stride, one touch, and the angle changed. As a defenseman, that's dangerous. You're trained to read patterns. Lafleur disrupted patterns by accelerating through them before they fully formed. When he came at you, you couldn't overcommit. If you stepped up too aggressively, he was gone. If you backed off, he gained the blue line with control. That balance is hard to manage. You're forced into a defensive gray zone where neither pressure nor patience feels safe. That uncertainty is exactly what makes a matchup tough. Lafleur also forced me to defend wider than I wanted. His speed stretched the ice horizontally. That meant more ground to cover, more decisions to make, more moments where timing had to be perfect. Against him, a half-step error wasn't a mistake. It was a scoring chance. That kind of pressure doesn't come from physicality. It comes from constant threat. What stood out most was how he attacked transition. Lafleur punished hesitation. If I hesitated on a pinch, he was already turning it the other way. If I hesitated on a gap, he attacked it immediately. That forced me to stay conservative at times, and conservatism was never where my game thrived. I wanted to push. He made pushing expensive. Even when he didn't score, Lafleur dictated attention. He pulled coverage. He forced early support. That opened space for others and limited how often I could jump into the play freely. Against most teams, I could choose when to attack. Against him, those choices narrowed. The toughest part wasn't stopping Lafleur once. It was sustaining discipline over an entire game. One lapse, one casual stride, one delayed read, and he made you pay. That wears on you mentally. You stop thinking about creating offense and start thinking about containment. Guy Lafleur didn't overpower me. He didn't outmuscle me. He outpaced the decisions. He forced a defenseman who relied on instinct and flow to slow down and calculate every move. And when a player makes you second-guess speed itself, that's toughness that stays with you. Number 2, Ken Dryden. Ken Dryden was tough in a way most people don't immediately understand. He didn't chase me. He didn't close lanes. He didn't pressure the puck. He stood at the end of the play and still managed to take control of everything that led to it. As a defenseman who built his game on creating advantages that was unsettling. Against Dryden, the usual reward for doing things right disappeared. Clean entries didn't feel clean anymore. Good shots didn't feel dangerous. I could move the puck, join the rush, generate chances, and still feel like nothing had changed. That's when you realize a goaltender has entered your head. When effort no longer equals outcome, control starts to slip. What made Dryden particularly difficult was his patience. He didn't overreact. He didn't bite on deception. He stayed tall, stayed square, and waited. That waiting forces decisions. As a defenseman jumping into the play, you expect chaos in front of the net. Rebounds. Broken structure. Against Dryden, there was none of that. Plays ended cleanly. Momentum stopped cold. That affected how I played earlier in the shift. When you know the final outcome is likely denial, you start pressing. You try to be perfect. You look for the extra pass. You delay a shot. That hesitation builds layer by layer. The game slows down in the wrong way. You're no longer imposing yourself. You're searching for a solution that might not exist. Dryden also dictated how his team defended. Because they trusted him completely, his defense could stay disciplined. They didn't have to collapse early. They didn't have to overcommit. That meant fewer gaps for me to attack. The entire structure stayed intact longer than it should have. Against most teams, pressure eventually breaks something. Against Dryden, the structure held. The toughest part was psychological. I could feel the ice tilt slightly every time a play ended in his glove. Not dramatically, just enough to remind you that control was slipping. Hockey is a game of belief as much as execution. Dryden challenged belief. He made you question whether your best ideas were good enough. Ken Dryden didn't beat me by stopping one shot. He beat me by removing consequence from effort, by making the game feel resistant instead of responsive. When a goaltender can do that, he becomes more than the last line of defense. He becomes the problem you have to solve before the puck even crosses the blue line. Number one, Phil Esposito. Phil Esposito was the toughest opponent I ever dealt with because he attacked the game at its center, not its edges. He didn't care how well I skated, how cleanly I moved the puck, or how fast I joined the rush. He went straight to the area where control actually mattered. The middle of the ice, the net front, the space where plays either die or turn into goals. Against Esposito, hockey stopped being about flow. It became about resistance. Every rush ended in traffic. Every shot turned into a confrontation. He planted himself in places that forced decisions I didn't want to make. As a defenseman, you want clarity. You want clean reads. Esposito made everything murky. Nothing finished the way it should have. What made him uniquely tough was that he didn't need the puck to control the play. His presence alone changed outcomes. Passing lanes vanished near the slot. Shooting lanes became dangerous because missed shots didn't just miss, they came back at you. Deflections, screens, rebounds, chaos followed him. That chaos stripped away precision, and precision was where my game lived. Esposito also forced physical commitment without chasing contact. If you tried to play him lightly, he stayed. If you leaned into him, you lost position. If you focused on clearing him out, you gave something else up. There was no clean answer. He didn't beat you in one moment. He drained you over time by forcing constant engagement. The hardest part was that he punished hesitation brutally. If I delayed a half second deciding whether to step up or stay back, he was already in position. If I tried to recover late, the play was over. Goals happened quickly around him, not because of speed, but because of inevitability. You could feel the play tipping before it finished. Esposito also changed how I approached defense. Joining the rush against him carried risk. If a play broke down, he was already between me and the net, ready to turn recovery into damage. That forced restraint. And restraint was the one thing I never wanted in my game. He made attacking feel expensive. What separates Esposito from everyone else on this list is that he didn't disrupt rhythm indirectly. He attacked it head on. He made control impossible near the most important part of the ice. Against him, even good hockey didn't always matter. Execution didn't guarantee outcome. Positioning did. Phil Esposito didn't beat me by taking the puck away. He beat me by making sure that when the puck mattered most, I couldn't decide the ending. He lived in the space where defensemen lose authority. And when an opponent can take control away from you right at the heart of the game, that's not just toughness, that's dominance. Looking back, what connects these five names isn't greatness in the way people usually talk about it, it's disruption. Each of them interfered with my ability to control the game in a different way. One took away time, another erased space, one forced hesitation through speed, one removed reward entirely, and one attacked control at the heart of the ice. None of that shows up cleanly on a stat sheet, but all of it reshaped how the game felt shift after shift. These were not enemies. They weren't personal obstacles. They were structural problems inside the flow of hockey. Each time I faced them, the game demanded adjustment. Simpler plays, safer decisions, more awareness. When you're known for instinct and freedom, being forced into restraint is the hardest test there is. Hockey at the highest level isn't about dominating every moment. It's about surviving pressure without losing your identity. These five players made that survival uncertain. They challenged how I saw the ice and how much control I could truly claim over it. That's what made them the toughest. Not what they did to me physically, but what they took away mentally. And if you watched me play and saw the freedom, these were the players who tried to take it from me every time I stepped on the ice. Who was the toughest opponent you ever watched challenge control like that?